Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Makers Arcade. I'm your host, Matt, and joining me today is Robin Baumgarten of Wobbly Labs with Wobblesphere. Hey, Robin, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I've got the Wobble Sphere here with me. It's sitting on the shelf back there, and I'm gonna show you guys in a minute how it all works.
so I guess for a lot of these interviews, I've started by saying, "How would you describe your game to someone who's never seen it before?" This one's a little different because there it is, but still, how would you describe your game? How would you describe what Wobblesphere is?
Well, it is actually quite tricky to describe, especially like if you don't have it there, right? But this is like a big ball full of door stopper springs and LED rings, and they're all touch sensitive and reactive, and that's a kind of a interactive light installation that kind of shows, like light things or little
Mhm,
mini games
mhm.
and stuff I'm currently prototyping with and kind of experimenting. What can it be?
And actually, this occurs to be a question that I forgot to ask you earlier. Like, how would it be set up in an ideal scenario? I know I've seen photos of it sort of on a pillar in the middle of a room.
Right. Yeah, I'm not quite decided yet. Also, like a pillar would be like the easy way, like a
Mhm,
like a lollipop almost.
mhm.
But I can also see it like suspended in like in space with like I don't know strings, metal strings. I
Yeah.
don't think it's someone asked last recently if it's solid enough to throw around, but I'm not quite sure. I think it might be solid enough, but it might poke out some ice. I'm not quite sure. Um,
Well,
so yeah.
yeah. Let's take a closer look at it if you can.
All right. Yeah. I'll try to bring it over and not break anything in the meantime. Um,
I'm
so
getting a
that's the
little bit of
thing.
the sound of the springs rattling as you move
Yes, I
around.
can. Right. So yeah, this is it. It's like it's got 72 sides. Oh yeah, this quite works
Oh
quite
yeah, it
well.
looks great. Yeah.
And each of the sides. This is like built like a football, right? Like a soccer ball, actually. So it's got these hexagons and pentagons, and it's like this.
We had a little bit of a blip
Uh,
there.
oh,
Uh,
yep.
can you hear me all right?
Am I good? Yes. Am I
Okay.
there again?
Yes.
Maybe the sphere had magical interference. Anyway, this is like uh, a sphere made out of 72 tiles. There's 12 pentagons and 60 hexagons. And then I found this online. So like some guy kind of basically mapped out all possible spheres, like from a tiny one to
Mhm.
super huge sizes. And I just took those dimensions and put them into Fusion 360, which is like a 3D modeling software, and kind of designed the circuit boards around that, and then kind of went from there, and that's what you got here. And then these springs, they're all doorstopper springs. I
Mhm.
think they're very popular in the States as well, and in the UK. Here in Germany, actually not. So I always have a bit trouble explaining what those are. But I find them very satisfying, and especially if you grow up in an environment that has some,
Oh,
the kids immediately know what to
absolutely.
do with it. Like they kind
Yeah.
of go and wobble, and it's like the satisfying kind of brrr, that you get. And I really like this kind of tactile feedback. And let me see if I can swap to an interactive mode.
Yeah.
So this one, let's
So
see.
it's 72 sides, 72 springs. How many LEDs are there per panel?
There's 16 LEDs per panel. So I forget now how much that is, but I think around 900 something. Um, yeah, so this is like a mode where it's just kind of slowly lighting up. It's also kind of to debug each tile if it's working while you build it. Um, yeah. Should I just go through a couple
Yeah, if
modes?
you could, I'd love to see what sort of stuff this thing can do.
Yeah, for sure. So this is like a let's I need to put the focus on here. Um, so this is like a little kind of a bee garden of sorts. So like there's like little particles running around. They're like bees,
Mhm.
and wherever you touch them, they come. And there's like um, I think there's also supposed to be flowers that kind of grow. So it's like a more of a like a peaceful interactive installation of like a
Mhm.
garden and like an electric garden basically. And you kind of play around and trying to find flowers. Um, And this was originally built for Wobblegarten, which is like the predecessor to this. It's
Hmm.
basically the same idea, but flat, right? So it's like a 2D version, if you will, of the same idea. And yeah, so I got a few of those, and there's like a freestyle mode. Well, actually, freestyle is number 2. Okay, here. The interface isn't quite perfect yet, but like this one is it's just like a mode where you can kind of tap and vibrate the springs, and then there's different effects coming. There's also supposed to be different sounds, although I haven't really attached a speaker at the moment.
So,
And then if you leave it alone, it'll go like into a little automatic attract mode.
oh
This one
wow,
might be quite bright, so
yeah,
like it might
that's fine.
like kill the lighting for a while. This is kind of an interesting thing. Also, like people go, "Wow, this is a bit too bright." But I kind of like this kind of where you like this kind of uncomfortable space where you're kind of used to a like a TV screen or monitor that is like, you know, always perfect brightness, doesn't really hurt your eyes. And this one is like more physical, right? It's like, oh my God, this can actually, well, not blind you, but like, you know, like you kind of step away a bit. And then
Yeah,
if you go in a different space later, you got these little stars, you know, when you looked into the sun, you get these little spots in your eyes. The LEDs do that to me
it's
sometimes. So
fascinating to watch it just completely take over the color of your room. So what is actually happening as the input mechanism in here? Like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, so there basically each spring is its own input, and then right now I'm just basically treating it as a button, right? So it's like touched is on,
Mhm.
let go is off. There is some ways to detect the amount you touch it, like because it's a touch sensitive, so it's capacitive touch, very similar to what like phone screens use to detect touch, you know. So there's a way to detect the amount of touch, but it's very sensitive to your body, your skin moisture,
Hmm.
the air temperature, and all this stuff. So right now, for simplicity's sake, I just made it on off, and
On
it's
off,
also
yeah.
easier for people to understand the interactions, right? In earlier versions of this, I actually had it so it would detect the vibration of each spring. But it's actually quite tricky to get the vibration of each spring and not the surrounding springs, right? So
Right.
like especially if you have the whole thing, like if I wobble this one spring, you can see like all the other springs start kind of shaking a little. It's like this kind of oscillation that is going on. And I really like this kind of wobbling of the whole thing. But you know, if you imagine trying to measure this as an input, it would be kind of
It would be a
terrible. At
nightmare,
least if you
yeah.
want, I mean, if you wanted like to be accurate, it would be a nightmare. If you
Yeah.
like see it as a like, for example, a musical instrument, it could be super cool, right? Like you start with one sound, and then you know it starts spreading out, and you get like this weird kind of maybe harmonies, or I don't know. I don't know too much about music. Actually, I want to maybe collaborate with an audio artist at some point to see if I can make this an instrument, like an audio instrument, right?
Any audio artists watching, at Robin B on Twitter, make the connection. This could be you. I remember playing with Wobblegarten twice actually. There was one at Wonderville here in Brooklyn,
Hmm.
where I distinctly remember seeing this mode, or maybe it was a precursor to the B mode that I think was labeled as Goldfish, whereas a
Yeah,
similar
that's the
thing.
one I have on
Yeah,
right now. So it's like a blue, and then there's like this, it's like a koi pond or something. Yeah, very zen. Like
I,
I was thinking, you know, what would it be like if it's on a wall, or like you barely interact with it, and sometimes you can touch it.
I
But yeah,
Yeah, I remember that. I remember a Twister variant, where you had to sort of stretch your hand to touch as many pins as possible. It seems like an extremely versatile. It's like this very fun abstracted touchscreen.
yeah,
um,
yeah, definitely. It is like a touch screen in a way. It's just like the pixels are all in a like a weird order, and the touches are also very strange. And it's very interesting for me to actually figure out like, you know, what affordances, what kind of new things does this bring to the table? Like having this screen being so weird, like not in a grid, but in these circles that are in a hex grid, and then
mhm.
each touch is very physical, and you can kind of, you know, bend it around. It's like what the Twister game kind of used a lot. Um, and it, for me, that's an ongoing process as well to figure out like, you know, what can be on here and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, and We were talking before the recording started. I remember seeing Wobblegarden again at Now Play This in, I guess, 2019, it must have been, um, where you had a big panel set up outside. And we had never met before. So I walked up to you and said, "Hi, I'm Matt. I volunteer at Wonderville. Hi." And while we were talking, a like 8-year-old kid walked up to your wall of springs and just started thrashing at it, which made me very nervous. But you seemed completely calm and completely okay with this. These devices are shockingly robust.
Yes, I mean that's I would like to say this is by design, but this is by definitely by trial and error. So like it took a few iterations to get it there, and yeah, it was like an earlier stress test that I did at my local makerspace back in London, and I have a video of this, so I can send it to you in a minute. Of like kids going wild, and I was like super scared it would break, but actually it survived fine. It was like no problem, and I guess in a way. This is also like I talked about the capacitive touch,
Mm-hmm.
and the nice thing about it is it doesn't have any moving components that are electrically important, right? So like even if the spring breaks off entirely, you can still use it, right? And then that's a quite nice thing. Like if the whole thing vibrates wildly, you still can interact with it and use it fully, right? So it's pretty good.
Yeah. And it also, like, I remember, this is me digging back 2 years, so correct me if this sounds completely incorrect, but I remember you saying that, like, the way it was networked, it would actually handle a tile completely disconnecting extremely well.
Yeah. So this was like because I've made it bigger, right? So like
Yeah.
I thought it was the small one, that the one you saw in Wonderville and probably in MacFest. And that was like one, and it was like one USB connection. But then I said, okay, what happens if I make it as big as I can? You know, like I want to make it like entire wall size eventually. And then there's like these interesting engineering challenges pop up. How do I get power for all these things? How do I get so much data from the computer or from whatever device is gonna generate the art to the LEDs? And yeah, for this bigger version, I had like 3 tiles that were separate, and they were all connected with USB. And you know, you could replug and unplug it, and it took quite a bit of tinkering to get that to work. And so for the next version, I'm going to use like probably Ethernet. And so I'm kind of currently digging into like all these Ethernet protocols and what's the difference between switchers and routers and like all these kind of network layers. And you know, like I want to get it like as fast as possible. So like I want to have almost no latency, and I want to have like as many frames as I can. Like this is like running at like 150 frames per second or something
Good
silly.
Lord.
Yeah, and I do like this kind of it's kind of the similar theme to the better than a screen, right? So it's like faster, more bright, and ideally also like lower latency. Like when you have your phone, you know, like each tap is like 100 milliseconds or more, while here it should be like less than 10 milliseconds. So really fast. So this immediacy, I really enjoy this about like physical devices, and I wanna keep it like to be super fast. But obviously that means like much more engineering, and then like going into the low level code of like sending the packages in the right order or whatnot. It's quite fun. I know very little about it, so I'm learning. But that's kind of also part of the reasons why I do this whole thing in the first place. It's like you always learn something new. Like, you know, I didn't do any electrical engineering in uni or anything, so it's all like learning by doing. You start with like a single LED, and then okay, let's make it a strip, and then okay, let's make it a series of circles, and then suddenly you end up with these weird spheres that look super complex, but in the end,
There's
it's
a
just kind of
chain.
starting
There's a path
simple.
that led you to this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'd actually love to hear a little bit more about the journey that brought you to this point. When did you first sort of get into, like, actually, I guess even maybe before Alter Control, how did you first get into sort of game design work?
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested in games, and I studied computer science, so it wasn't like entirely alien. And then, yeah, during my degree, actually, I started making a couple small games. I made a couple mobile phone games that I really enjoyed. And for one of those games, I thought, okay, I can make a sequel, and the sequel had like little sliders on the screen, right? And at one point, I noticed, oh, actually, I can have like physical sliders like you have on a DJ pult, you know, like this kind of thing. And then it started spiraling from there as well, like going, okay, if I have a slider, maybe I can motorize it like the high-end DJ pulse, right? 1 second, I need to have a sip.
I'll join you. Cheers.
Yeah, and so I found these little motorized sliders, and that was really cool because it was like directional force feedback that not many things do now. Like I think the newest Sony PlayStation 5 controllers have it in their triggers, and that's quite interesting to see. But this was kind of my first foray into stuff with like Arduinos and connecting things to like to Unity or to computer that is physical, right? And that was also the first year that Alt Control GDC happened. So that's like this festival at GDC, the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. They have this alternative controller section, like a small area full of tables, full of like weird hardware contraptions, and that was really fun. That was like kind of because you don't really need to have a highly polished prototype to showcase at GDC, but you can have like a small little Arduino experiment, and because the scene is still like so small and experimental that it's no problem to get in as long as your idea is kind of new and unique enough, right?
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed this, and that kind of also was like partly the reason I kept going and experimenting with these physical things, and yeah, just kept going from there. So like I started doing game jams just with hardware. So like I brought my little Arduino, like a breadboard that you can actually see in a screen background, like over here.
Yep.
On your overlay.
One of these.
And, like, exactly. Oh yeah. And then I brought a couple sensors and said, okay, today we're gonna experiment, I don't know, with a pressure sensor. And then like your brain starts brainstorming. It's like, oh, what can I do with a pressure sensor? I can put it in a balloon and have like something with like, you put pressure on a balloon, or something you run upstairs and downstairs, and the air pressure changes between the height. It's like a height sensor. So it's like really interesting as a kind of a brainstorming device to limit yourself and to kind of come up with new ideas. And that really worked for me. So like I kind of found this was like a way for me to make new things. Obviously, like 80 or 90% of those things were one-off experiments that weren't quite great enough to show ever again. But at one of those game jams, I made Line Wobbler, and that's kind of probably the thing I am mostly most widely known for. It's like this one-dimensional dungeon crawler, made also with a spring. So it's like still the same theme for me. I got a box here of it, like half disassembled, so you can see the sensor on top. It's like a little acceleration sensor, and then there's like a large spring. I started out using the doorstopper springs, but it turns out they're too weak when you use them as a joystick, especially when there's kids playing or drunk people playing.
Yeah, no, this is set up at a bar a few blocks from my
and like ripping it in any direction possible. And I quickly noticed that like when you make hardware games, you not only have software bugs, you have hardware bugs as well. And the worst thing is you only notice them like live when you're showing it off. It's like, oops, you can actually pull up on this thing and it suddenly comes apart. And yeah, so that's kind of was a very interesting experience. Like this is like probably iteration 20 or 30. These springs are now custom made for me in a spring factory, and the circuit boards are like super sturdy, and that was really fun. And that was also kind of what got me more into it, like because suddenly museums, events, and so on started asking, hey, can we show this for a weekend, for our little festival or something? And we can pay you an artist fee for this. And this is where basically my aha moment, where I said, oh, maybe this is a thing I can do, maybe not full time right away, but like it could be a little bit of pocket money, right? Sending this thing over. And then, depending on the size of the event, you would get like $500 for sending it out for a week and so on, and I said, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And it went from there. And now, there's one in New York at Wonderville, and there is a couple around it at like bars. I've shown it at a few museums that are now noticing that games can be art, and that wasn't so clear a while ago.
They finally figured it out. Yes.
But kind of at the beginning, I thought, okay, I made this and that's it, and I go back to software development. But surprisingly, the interest kept going, and that was now like 6 years ago, more or less. And I still do things with Line Wobbler, right? So like well, Corona permitting, going to a festival in the summer again with it, where I'm showing it in Munich. And there's always like a couple small things that pop up, and over the years, I've then decided, okay, I can actually make this full time. In the beginning, not like, you know, with the highest salary as a software developer, but it is exactly what I want to do, and it is what I enjoy. And from there on, I kind of it branched out, and I kind of thought, okay, what else can I build? And Wobble Garden came soon after. It's like, oh, I enjoy making things with springs and LEDs. How can I make other things with it? And so I said, okay, maybe I add more springs and see how this changes, like how you interact with it. And it was interesting because with Line Wobbler, the idea for this arcade game came fairly quickly. So it's like this one-dimensional dungeon crawler, right? You have an attack, you have a goal. It's fairly traditional game in a way, right? But with Wobble Garden, I didn't find this kind of traditional game idea right away. I said, okay, this is more free form. People like just to touch it and see lights, and they don't really care if there's a goal or an end state. So I said, okay, maybe I'll lean into this and go more into the like visual art kind of ambient game kind of thing direction. And that's kind of what I've been kind of doing. And this is also what happened with Wobblesphere, where it is more of an ambient installation where you can interact with it and things happen, but there's no clear goal. Or like, I mean, there might be like, you know, like if I come up with something, there might be, okay, the twister has a clear goal, but then it's like Koi Pond is more like, okay, you put it somewhere and it's cool to watch and it's interactive. So it's kind of this interesting journey between, you know, very traditional games and then arcade, like physical hardware games that are very traditional in the game mechanics, to more weird and abstract things that are both abstract in their shape but also in their function, right?
It's been really interesting for me. I don't know, for anyone out there who's been following my extremely short career in doing this sort of event. I spent a lot of time sort of prior to this MakersPlay event sort of talking to more traditional game developers about their games, how they got started, etc. And I've had a lot of great conversations over the last like week or two with people like you about the sort of difference between a traditional game with traditional motives and like these more ambient games, and games where like you're creating an ecosystem where the people playing around with it are going to find the fun themselves and stuff like that. And it's really fascinating to see the way in which Alt Control sort of lends itself really well to creating like, I feel like in my mind, it's almost the difference between like a game and a toy, which I say in the best possible way. I think that is not like a demeaning term in my book at all. And that is this fun thing that you can sort of walk up to and play with. And I remember noticing with like the fish pond simulator on Wobble Garden, it was just sitting on a table in the middle of a room, and like 5 people would show up there and start sort of like casually competing for fish and like trying to play around with each other's things. And none of that's actually like a hard mechanic of any sort. It's just this sort of emergent play that comes from the setup.
Yeah, and I really like this kind of aspect, and I do need to sit down at one point and really kind of make I want to make a more complex interaction with this as well, but leaning exactly into this kind of discovery interaction, right? You touch it and it's like, did I do this, or was it like always there, or like if I touch it over here, this thing happens, and like these emergent kind of stories that players tell themselves. I kind of want to lean into this and kind of maybe have like hidden discoveries, like you say, oh, if you touch on opposite sides, like the lights are different, and then like if you do long enough, suddenly it changes into this different mode and stuff like that. So this could be a very interesting direction to go into, for sure. Yeah, and it does sit somewhere between a toy, a game, and an art installation. And I kind of use this comparison myself. It's like I've submitted it to a few festivals. Actually, I submitted it. I think it was Line Wobbler to South by Southwest a few years back. And I wanted to submit it into the games section, and they said, "Oh no, we need a playable, like an executable." And it's like, "No, this is like a hardware game. I can't send it to you." And it's like, "Oh no, sorry, we only do software games. You can send it to the art track instead." And then the art track said, "No, what is this? This is like a game. We don't want games. Send it to the game track." And this was it was a little bit annoying at the time, but I kind of really enjoy not sitting in a clear-cut category with this, like, kind of making people a bit uncomfortable when they're trying to put it somewhere. And it was also with IGF, the Indie Games Festival at GDC. So they have a big software indie festival award ceremony. And it's the same idea there. Like, all the judging happens on the computers before the festival, but obviously you can't do this with hardware games.
Yeah.
And now they made an award. So I think I had a small part in it, kind of trying to emailing them, so kind of harassing them, almost saying, hey, I really want to take part in this. Can I? And I said, no, sorry. But now they made this award for kind of future generations, which I'm really happy about. So there's no resentment whatsoever. I'm kind of happy to be like, like when you're the one of the pioneers of this weird space, then obviously there isn't any kind of conveniences for you there, but it's cool. I enjoy it.
Yeah, it seems like the scene, as someone taking part in a new festival about all control games, it seems like the scene is gaining a lot of momentum. Like, I know you were on Indiecade has started a recurring show about all control games, where you were on the first episode, as well as some other folks who will be showcasing with us over the weekend. And I feel like people are starting to really catch on that this is like a fun, unique thing, and something that we should really be exploring more. It's interesting. Just the other day, I was talking to one of our other developers who runs a alt games design lab at UC Santa Cruz, and sort of hearing about like it's starting to hit the academic scene too. People are really starting to pay attention to it there. They also don't know how to classify any of it. That's okay. They'll figure it out. And it really seems to be just like exponential growth over the past sort of couple of years. And actually, on that note, I'm curious if there's folks who are watching from home right now who are thinking, boy, I'd love to make something like that. What sort of advice do you have for like getting started in the all-controlled world?
Yeah, it's actually surprisingly easy to get started. You don't need to think about too much about like making a big installation right away, or like this massive game. You can start really small, and the space of like microcontrollers and like these little devices has become very like large, but also very accessible. So like there's now devices used for, I got one over here actually. This is like the BBC Microbit. I don't know if it's known in the States much, but this is like what the BBC uses, or like the BBC commissioned it for pupils, I think mostly in Britain. But this is like a really small, like little device. It's like, I don't know, $20, but it's got a microphone, an accelerometer, a little display, touch buttons, and like even like a little radio thing on it. And you can program it just by plugging it in, and there's like a browser-based click and drag interface. So you don't even need to know how to program, and you can make your own little physical thing with it. So the starting the startup cost basically is very low. So like it's very easy to get started these days. And then it's interesting to go from there and to build something, but it's also very difficult to build something that actually lasts, right? So almost everything like breaks immediately when you test it for the first time, and that'll keep happening like, for years down the road. So it is tricky to build something that is that you can sell, right? So like that's an interesting kind of problem to see how you kind of, do you want to live of it, or do you want to just make it for fun? And for fun is easy, right? So you just make it. You have now a lot of shows like in Europe and in the States and everywhere else that like basically everything that likes indie games also likes these hardware experiments now. And so it's very easy to get exhibited at those. But making money from it is still a bit more tricky. And I think like actually folks in the States have it figured out a bit better. Like there's like this interesting overlap with arcade machines, right? Which this is kind of what people at Wonderville do, right? And the Death by Audio arcade, where you build indie arcade machines, right? And this is kind of an interesting overlap with these weird hardware installations, right? There's like you have like a classical shape, and but then you have like weird controllers or like kind of indie games in it, and I think this could be a really interesting hybrid of like finding a way to kind of make a living out of it. But in the beginning, I would just say like grab a small toy. There's always communities in every big city has a makerspace now, or like a fab lab or
Mhm.
hack space. Even like indie communities have often like little hardware sections now. I haven't really seen too many like big syndicated groups of people that do hardware things. Mostly it's like one or two person teams like hacking away in their little space. But I do see these forming now slowly, and it's a very exciting time.
Mhm.
And it's also not as polluted as other spaces. Like if you make a mobile game now, you're competing with like 1,000 other games
Yep.
that are released just on that day. But if you make a weird, cool hardware alt control game, is a good chance to show it at the world's biggest games conference at GDC, where they have these hardware sections now and hardware parties as well, which I used to organize before the pandemic hit. So there's like a lot of things happening now. So it's a good time to get into it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And like from my experience of just like, like this, just because I have it on my desk, like, yeah, this is an Adafruit microcontroller that has a temperature sensor and a light
Yep.
sensor and a speaker, and it was $17. So like, just buy a little thing, plug it into your computer, learn to like play with the inputs, figure out something. Um, we're just about out of time here. Robin, thank you so much for joining us. Are there any new upcoming projects or things you'd like to plug, or should I just tell people to follow you on Twitter and check out your website?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can show you what I'm working on right
Yeah.
now, but it is not really finished. So, but I can lift it up here. It is kind of. It was born out of the early days of the pandemic where you couldn't touch anything. So I built like a foot controller. So I found this thing here. It's like you see these massive springs, right?
Yeah.
So this is actually physiotherapy device for like when you, I think, hurt your ankles or something, right? So you step on it and you balance. And I put a little sensor on the bottom of it, and actually you can see it maybe in the back of my screen. There's something I taped on the wall, and it's like a 2-axis line wobbler in a way. It's not fully complete, and like you can see, if I move it left and right, things happen in the back. This is what I'm experimenting on now. So like I'm kind of seeing, oh, what cool experiments or mechanics can I make with this? This is what I'm working on now, and if it works out and if it's kind of safe enough, I mean, it seems a bit dangerous if you fall off. So I'm a bit worried of showing it in the States, actually, where I might be sued to death. Who knows? But this is a thing I'm kind of playing around with, and it's kind of small enough to fit into this little hack space, makerspace I made in my bedroom. But yeah, so this is kind of what I'm working on, but I don't know if it'll get anywhere. This is like the beauty of those experiments. But yeah, that's what I'm doing. And yeah, if you want to know more, down on the bottom here, you can see my website is wobblylabs.com. And I it's more like a wiki of all my experiments, so you can kind of click through and see them.
All right. Well, thank you again, Robin. This has been a delight, and I'll talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, that was super fun. Thanks, Matt.
See ya.
See you around, guys.